Daring feats. We've heard some daring stories already, but here are a few people you might not have heard of who really did something unexpected. Marion Pritchard was a Dutch social work student who was born in 1920. She was just 22 years old when she saw Nazis enter an orphanage for Jewish children and, picking them up by a leg or an arm or even by the hair, toss them into a truck for deportation. She was shocked and then galvanized. By the age of 25, she had lied, cheated, and stolen to rescue dozens of Jews. She hid a father and his 3 young children, including a newborn baby, in her home. One night, 3 Germans and a Dutch Nazi searched her house. The father and the children hid in a secret space beneath the floor, but they didn't have time to give the baby, Erica, her sleeping powder. So even though it was still dangerous after the Nazis left, when the baby began to cry, Marion let the children out. When one Nazi returned and saw them, Marion pulled out a gun and killed him on the spot. She later became a psychoanalyst and moved to the United States. She died this year at the age of 96. She always insisted that she could not have saved so many people without the help, overt or implied, of friends and neighbors. She recalled that rarely, if ever, was one person able to save another single-handedly during the Holocaust. Bob Hoover was a pilot in World War II. After flying 58 successful missions, his plane was shot down and he was captured by the Germans for 16 months. In the final days of the war, he escaped by stealing a Nazi plane, which he then flew into the Netherlands. But when he landed, he was chased by farmers wielding pitchforks who mistook him for a Nazi. Hoover had always been a daredevil. When senior pilots at a Mediterranean air base kept lording it over him, he finally silenced and scared them by flying his plane under a bridge those senior pilots were standing on. He went on to become a stuntman, famous for a death-defying plunge with both engines cut off, in which he would use the plane's momentum to pull up into a loop at the last second. Mr. Hoover was one of the most honored pilots in American history, and he flew well into his 80s. When the FAA tried to remove his pilot's license at the age of 72, he went and got certified in Australia, then took the FAA to court and won. He died in October at 94. Gilbert Kaplan's daring feat was of a different sort. Kaplan was an economist by training. He launched a financial magazine for pension fund and asset managers at the age of 26, and 17 years later sold his company for over $70 million, but he was just getting started. By then, he'd already put his wealth to work, embarking on what the New York Times called one of the strangest acts of wish fulfillment in musical history. Although Kaplan had no formal musical training, he wanted to be a conductor. Not just any conductor. He wanted to be the conductor of one symphony. It was Mahler's Second Symphony, known for being exceedingly difficult. It has 5 movements spanning 90 minutes, which incorporate the absolute heights and depths of human life, from birth and joy to death and resurrection. The idea that an untrained person could take it on was absolutely ridiculous, but that is what Kaplan did. He obsessed over recordings, and he traveled the world listening to every live performance. He interviewed experts, did a month-long boot camp immersion to learn the mechanics of conducting. And after a nervous debut with the American Symphony Orchestra in 1982, Kaplan went on to conduct that piece, and only that piece, over 100 times with some of the most famous orchestras in the world, including the Vienna Philharmonic, the London Symphony, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and to the disbelief of his better-trained critics, the New York Philharmonic, too. He died last January at 74. Finally, Junko Tibay was the first woman to summit Mount Everest. Tibay became fascinated with mountains on a school trip when she was 10 years old. Although her family was poor, she married a fellow mountaineer, became a mother, and worked several jobs to fund her climbing expeditions. As she prepared for Everest, she sought corporate sponsorship as other climbers did, but she was repeatedly told that women should not climb mountains, and especially not that mountain. Persisting, she eventually got a Japanese newspaper and TV network to sign on. Tibay organized an all-female expedition of climbers, and leaving her 3-year-old daughter and husband in Tokyo, she set out for Nepal. On her way up the mountain, her camp was hit by an avalanche, and a Sherpa pulled her out unconscious by the ankles. When she awoke and saw that everyone in her group was alive, they kept on going. When the male journalists that the sponsor had sent along to document the trip wanted to turn the group back, Junko Tibay, who, by the way, was just 4 feet 10 inches tall, prevailed. In 1991, she told the Washington Post, "If you climb with men, there are so many troubles. I had to say, I am the leader, and I determine that, even if you are the sponsor. Since then, I haven't had sponsors. I'm much happier." She summited on May 16, 1975, and then she went on to summit the tallest mountain on each of the world's 7 continents. She died in October at the age of 77. But she never lost her desire to climb, and she was still leading groups of high schoolers up Mount Fuji in Japan as late as last July. And why not? May we all do what we can when we can, and do as Muhammad Ali says, don't count the days, but make the days count.